early childhood development. Each week we talk about a different stage of children development and what children need. And now, here comes your host.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Taryn, and you are listening to The Parent Thing. I am so excited about today's conversation because I think it's a conversation that doesn't happen often enough. When we generally speak about parenting, a picture that is painted is this happy family dynamic where two parents are getting along and everything is great. But the reality is that's not every child's reality. And more often, sadly than not, children are in a situation where two parents are not together or not getting along very well. And so I reached out to a co-parenting coach to join me in this conversation today. Her name is Viviane Veraguth, and I am so excited to have her here to talk about what co-parenting healthily looks like and ways to get into a dynamic of healthy co-parenting. Viviane, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be here.
So, can you tell our listeners who you are and what do you do?
Sure. I am Viviane, and I'm a certified co-parenting and divorce coach. So what I do is I provide guidance and support really for parents navigating the challenges of parenting during a separation and after. I address really also the nervous system of parents as they're going through the trauma of a separation and divorce, and support them during this time of heightened stress and anxiety triggered by the trauma of loss, really.
That is amazing. That is such powerful work, and it must be not easy, I would imagine. So, how did you get into starting your business? Like, what is your why?
Yeah. I transitioned from a career, I mean, I've had many lives, I think, in so many ways. So let me just kind of jump in from sort of the middle. I transitioned from a career in software design and recruiting to owning a Pilates and yoga studio, where I encountered my second burnout, which coincided with my second divorce.
Okay.
And embracing roles as a teacher, coach, and then also stepmother presented me with new challenges, which turned me into wanting to pursue a degree in divorce and step parenting. And then later I added a certificate in somatic trauma therapy, and also that of a nervous system expert. Because of my many layers of trauma, it really became my mission to offer clients a trauma-informed sanctuary where I can work with them through the roller coaster of grief and loss towards healing and resilience during their time of the unknown, and support them and really support the children, them and their children through divorce, really, and beyond. The beyond is really key.
So important, yeah. So, what exactly does co-parenting entail?
Yeah. As a co-parenting coach, I provide guidance and support to parents as they're navigating the challenges of parenting during and after the separation and divorce, right? I'm going to use those terms intermittently, by offering them not only practical strategies and emotional support, but also communication strategies. And that's a key, something we're going to dive into later on, I'm sure. I also want to help them create a positive co-parenting environment so that the children eventually, well, not eventually, but they can thrive, right?
Yeah.
That's really the key here. Divorce and separation is just a really challenging process that brings a lot of struggle, a lot of grief or associated grief, and stress, and particularly guilt with it. And as a coach, I help my clients navigate the complexities of co-parenting while helping them maintain just a mental and emotional well-being. And then there are some specifics that I help them with. So it's really about reducing conflict between parents. Like I mentioned, it's really about improving communication. I support collaboration. I mean, that's really a key here. While I usually work with one parent, I can certainly work with both of them as well. I am not on one side where we fight the other. It is about collaboration because I want the parents to get along for the sake of the children.
Because that's what's important here, right?
But it's important, right? Because we want to have a child-centric environment, right? That's the here. We don't want to put the kids in the middle so that they become a tug-of-war, right? Into the tug-of-war here. Let's just say if I work with one parent or even with two, I help them set boundaries, healthy boundaries, expectations. Right? It's about communication, interactions. I help, and let me kind of talk about with one parent, parenting plan. It's really important to have a parenting plan in place because let's face it, it's even if you are raising a child, what are the expectations?
Yeah.
When should the child go to bed? All those different things. We review and adjust a co-parenting plan, and that really is about, children's needs evolve depending on age. We promote a healthy and supportive environment kids can thrive in, and then emotional well-being, and that's for the parents again, and then really about child's needs and what they are going through during this process. And then again, if needed, I can be a go-between the parents.
Okay.
Couple of things I should mention. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a mediator, and I'm not a mental health specialist.
Okay, so essentially your role, your purpose in this is to not exactly mediate because you're not a mediator, but to help parents collaborate to give their children their very best chance. So earlier you mentioned that you do both co-parenting coaching as well as divorce coaching. What is a divorce coach like? What does that look like?
Yeah, so very similar to a co-parenting coach. I work with my clients to go through the logistics of a divorce. So I'm here to work with clients, to work with them through communication with their ex-partner and really getting a client through the logistics and financial unknowns, empower them to make decisions that work for them and their children. I'm their advocate. I guide them through the process and their emotional aspect. I'm really their strategic partner. The most important part here, I can save them money. How? A lawyer charges what, anywhere from $250 to what, $750 an hour? I don't. So anything that a client can work with me strategically, we can have options figured out before they go to a lawyer.
Right. So
now,
they can figure out the logistics and then just have the lawyer legally implement.
Now, does a client want to burden a lawyer with their emotional business? Absolutely not. A lawyer doesn't have capacity nor time
or the training.
This is what I do. This is where I come in. Another thing to mention is the American Bar Association recognizes divorce coaching as an alternate form of dispute resolution. So
Wow.
anybody who actually can figure things out with their partner to get through a divorce without pulling in a lawyer potentially, or even a mediator, can work with just a divorce coach.
That's
So
amazing.
and it's amazing. So, and and then all the other things that I can do with a client working
Yeah.
on their nervous, but that's for another podcast.
Absolutely. So I want to get into divorce and separation because
Yes.
it takes such an emotional toll on parents. It takes such an emotional toll on kiddos. And I want to say that there's grief involved because it's a loss, right? It's a loss of a family unit that you once knew. It's loss of relationship. It's loss of what was once normal. It's this huge loss, and it takes such a toll on kids. Can we get into that a little bit? Like how to balance the grief, the loss, the emotions of it, and how it affects what is now, what this new family unit is going to look like.
Absolutely. There's a quote. I think one of my teachers had it somewhere in her material many years ago, and she said, "A parent's job isn't to protect their children from adversity; it is to teach them how to deal with it."
That is so powerful because I teach this to my parents that I'm coaching as well, that when we are here to have a human experience, we have to experience it all. There's no way to protect your child from pain all the time. There's no way to, put them in this bubble where they'll never feel hurt and they'll never be heartbroken and they'll never bump their heads in some way or form, whether literally or physically. And so I love that quote. I think I may steal that and use it when I'm teaching parents because it's so important to understand that adversity is going to happen in some way, shape, or form. Just the mere fact that we were born onto this earth and are human, that's your sign that something's going to go wrong. And so often in society, we avoid that. We don't want to feel sad. We don't want to be heartbroken. We don't want to cry. We don't want to, we try to avoid these emotions. And a big part of my coaching is teaching parents to help their children become emotionally intelligent and know that it's okay to feel this broad spectrum of human emotions and how to actually healthily deal with the emotions. So I love that. I absolutely love that.
Absolutely. Another thing is grief is not time specific and or a linear process. So that is something that I think is another thing that emotional intelligence teaches us, or grief really teaches us, right? Grief happens when it happens. And oftentimes it happens at very inconvenient times. Now, us grown-ups know that, or we learn to know that. Children don't. This may be the first time they truly have experienced that, besides maybe from their hamster dying. And, the conversation around the hamster oftentimes goes, oh, the hamster decided to live in the forest all of a sudden because that's where the hamster family lives, and they get confused about that. But then the parents come up with these crazy, weird stories, and don't we all have those kind of weird stories somewhere?
Yeah.
Anyway, back to what you asked me. Parents are not emotionally experiencing divorce in the same way. And parents often forget is that children also move through a grieving process.
Yes.
Everyone in a family has a unique way of grieving. So when divorce or separation occurs, children often experience a wide range of emotions. Big changes happen, stress levels go up, it's not uncommon for children to act out on those feelings. And this is when co-parents may see significant shifts in the children's behavior. As a parent, it's often challenging to know how those changes, or which changes are normal and which ones aren't. Children might be very expressive about their feelings, yet there's a lot of stuff going on in the background. So, and I'll get to that in a little bit. In a little bit. In her research and clinical work, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she's a Swiss-born psychiatrist, identified the 5 stages of grief. And this is something that individuals may experience when facing the loss of a loved one. And you may have heard that these stages are often referred to as the Kubler-Ross model of the 5 stages of grief. And these stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So we often think that only adults go through these stages, but children go through those stages as well. And as adults go through divorce, there's oftentimes this discussion, oh, I'm in the denial phase, or I'm in the anger phase. Well, children do the same thing. They go through that too. But oftentimes parents just see themselves. So in working with my clients, I talk a lot about those things, but with my clients, but I also, particularly when I work with my co-parenting clients, I ask about the children. For example, anger. How does it look like? Are the children getting into, or let's just say, is the child getting into, how does their anger look like? Are they acting out? Are they starting to blame? Are they being reactionary? I remind clients that criticizing or bad-mouthing the ex-partner impacts children's self-esteem. Maybe that's where the anger is coming from. Maybe that is why the child is acting out towards them. That is where the anger is coming from.
Absolutely.
This is where a conversation is starting to develop, right? And I always say, every child has the right to love both parents as much as you don't like your ex right now.
It's still their parent.
Very important. So it is very important that co-parents understand that there needs to be more work other than potential therapy for themselves, nervous system regulation work, and right, we know a lot about that, and we'll talk more about that. Obviously, a co-parenting coach is amazing, can do amazing work for them. Starting to read books is such a crucial time, not only for themselves, but also for the children. And I gave you a couple of options, and I think you can add them to the podcast as
Yes,
well.
I'll add the books that you have here. I will add to the show notes, but I don't know. Do you just want to read off the titles real quick? And I will add them to the show notes, though.
Yeah, absolutely. One for parents is Parenting Apart by Christina McGee. A book for younger children is My Family's Changing by Pat Thomas. That's for 3 to 6 year olds. And another book for older children, Mom's House, Dad's House by Isolina Ricci, 10 to 12 year olds. I have a plethora of books which I can share with clients. I eventually will have a longer list on my website as well.
Okay, perfect. So when parents are coaching with you and they need help and advice, can you share some practical tips that you give to your parents, to your clients, when the other parent isn't cooperative, when things are a little volatile?
Yeah. Like with the last question, I started out with a little quote, and this is one of my favorite quotes, although it's also a little bit of a sad quote.
Mm-hmm.
When you fight fire with fire, kids get burnt.
Mm.
Let that sink in for a moment. When you fight fire with fire, kids get burned.
Yeah. Yeah.
The real, really powerful one. And it's one to really remember.
Mm-hmm.
So your question was kind of strategies and tips. So
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite strategies when things get challenging, difficult, my favorite one is an acronym, and it stands, I'm not going to tell you right away what it stands for. It's
Okay.
BIFF. And the acronym stands for brief, informative, friendly, and firm. When things get difficult, communicating with a challenging individual, it's a little tricky in person, but especially over email. Think brief, informative, friendly, and firm. Let me give you an example. You get an email or a text message from your ex, and it goes like this. Because you didn't show up for last week's game, you need to be a father for once to your daughter and come this week and take her to the game at 3 p.m. Come at 2, but don't be late because you will embarrass her if you show up late, and make sure you go to the right place, the Lauren Field. She barely sees you, and you said she would prefer if I took her, but I said you will come and get her, so please show up this time.
That's triggering.
That's triggering. I mean, I think we would find a few other things in there.
Yeah, but I mean, I've heard parents talk to each other this way and realizing now, like, whoa, there's so many attacks here. Like, there's just attack after attack after attack. And I don't,
Emotionally charged, full of blame, rage, hatred.
yep.
Now, can we agree that the person who wrote this also speaks to their child about their father that way?
Right. Let's hope he'll show up this time. We can't guarantee that. You'd like just planting these seeds of doubt. And
100%.
that is very personal for me because kids don't have a frame of reference to believe anything else that you were telling them, right? So when you're saying things like, oh, your dad is so useless, he's not going to show up, blah, 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 like all these little jabs at the other parent. And we're just using dad as an example here. We're not saying that this is always the case because sometimes it's the mom as well.
Mm-hmm.
When you're doing that, these seeds are planted in this child, and this is what they believe because they don't see differently, right? Kids are very susceptible to what you say to them, right? And they take that as law, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I was a victim of that, where I had been told one thing about another parent, and my relationship with that parent still today is a struggle because I still struggle to believe that that parent loves me, that that parent cares, that that parent cared at all when I was a kid, because what I was told was what I believed. So that relationship is still not as great as what could have been had there been not those seeds planted.
Absolutely.
So you gave this example with all these attacks, and it, like you said, so emotionally charged. With your acronym, what would a good way to communicate that information be?
Mm-hmm. So before I do that, let's go back to my quote. When you fight fire with fire, kids get burned. So the person responding has two choices. Fight fire with fire
Mm-hmm.
because they're triggered. The hook hooks in and pulls on that string because they're triggered and starting to unravel, fighting fire with fire, and the children get burned, and this
Yeah.
can go on for
Yeah.
years, years and years and years. Or working with a good co-parenting coach, they could apply, and this takes a lot of work and a lot of patience, and Rome wasn't built in a day, and
Absolutely.
learning how to ride a bicycle takes
Yeah.
a lot of effort, right? You could respond applying the BIF rule. Now, brief, informative, friendly, and firm. The response could look like, thank you for the details. I will be at your house at 2 p.m.
And that's it. So that would be a good response. But what would a good way be to ask them to arrive instead of saying, because you didn't show up and you're always late and don't embarrass her and all of that? Like, instead of saying all of that, what would a good way to write that?
Yep.
Briefly, informatively, friendly, and firmly? What would that look?
Absolutely. Sarah's soccer game is on Saturday at 3 p.m. at the Lauren Field. She is very excited for you to be there. Please pick her up at 2 p.m.
Even that just gives a sense of calm, right? There's no drama. There's no.
I mean, between the line, she could put in bleep, bleep, bleep. I bleep, you bleep, you bleep, beep, bleep.
Right. But it's not necessary, and that's the point, right?
Not necessary.
It's not necessary when we really
I mean,
have
we're
the
going
well-being
off
of the child.
she, him, see, I mean,
Yeah.
data, it doesn't really matter. But right.
But what I'm saying is that when you really have the well-being of your child at heart, all the internal feelings that you're feeling doesn't need to be projected like that. You can go for counseling or something else to deal with those feelings. But when having that communication for the sake of the kid, it's best to hold those feelings and not saying don't feel it, not saying they're not valid, because maybe the other parent is unreliable and maybe they are always late and maybe they didn't show up the last time. That could all be true. But for the sake of the child, you hold on to that and deal with it on your own.
Yep.
Versus all this word vomit, for lack of a better term, and just attacking the other parent, right?
And absolutely. And in a lot of cases, everything you just said is often true. Unreliable parent on the mom or the dad side. Very high conflict, doesn't show up, changes the schedule all the time. The scenarios I've seen are brutal at times. So it does, and that's why this is extremely difficult to deal, by yourself. That's why, there are people who can support. There's a book I can also suggest, which is a great helper, but having that extra support of a coach and really working through this until it's truly in your system. And we're not only talking in your system so that it becomes second nature. On the other side, you also have to learn how to regulate your nervous system and work on taking care of your anxiety, and at the same time taking care of your own well-being.
Right.
So
There has
that
to be that balance.
you can be a better person. Because every time you get a new text and it makes bing, you cannot get into a dysregulated state. Just, oh my God, what is this text message going to say? Right?
Yeah.
So, and I want to get to regarding the text messages and the communication, I do want to add something how that can be managed too. But the book I want to recommend here too, which can also give a little bit of support, is called BIFF for Co-Parents, written by Bill Eddy. Bill Eddy is a high conflict expert. He has some great books out there. It is all about communication strategies and how to write those kind of responses. Again, great book in support with working with someone. Again, you have to get this into your blood to respond like that. Being highly triggered, being really coming off a high level of stress, and then being asked, and now you have to write a nice email. Not going to work. Not going to work. That's basically asking someone who was just, again, I'm talking nervous system activation again, basically asking for someone who was just charged by a tiger to immediately after go paint you a picture with daisies on it.
Right.
Not a good idea.
No.
Also, if and then we can move on to your next question. But the last things I wanted to share, I have so many things to say about this, you know.
It's such a powerful topic. It really
right. Kiddos in mind. If communication with an ex-partner becomes too challenging, oftentimes it is court appointed to use a app that puts all the communication in one place, because it is known that high conflict ex-partners try to reach you through many different avenues, just to manipulate you or try to change things all the time. And the courts then have a way to see your communication. So there are apps like Our Family Wizard or Talking Parents. Now, co-parents can also do that together as a way of just streamlining communication. So it doesn't have to be court appointed. It can be something for the two of them to just make it a little bit easier. And this is something from scheduling appointments to sharing expenses or just having communication in one place, because it can get overwhelming with, you know, especially if several children are involved.
Absolutely. So, can I pose some scenarios to you and you tell me how you would coach parents through that? Okay. So,
yes.
Two parents are getting divorced. How do they tell their children that they are getting divorced?
Yeah. So, you know, and let me kind of say something ahead. I would have to say something ahead of that. Okay. The biggest sort of fear of parents is, I have to wait until my child is older before we get divorced. And my answer to that is, it doesn't matter. Age does not matter. It's how you tell the children, how you involve the children. And that is what matters, right? Because if you are separating or divorcing, or let me step back, if you are in an unhealthy marriage, your children know. And it always amazes me how,
it doesn't matter how old they are, they know.
So yes, it always amazes me how parents think their children don't know what's going on. Children are incredibly intuitive,
Oh,
and
yeah.
most children whose parents tell them that they're getting divorced, they already knew something's up. So would I ask, so first of all, I find it incredibly important for both parents to tell the children
Okay.
together as a family. Now, that is not only available and possible for both parents because it is already so conflicted. So let's just assume it is not available, and I have one client comes to me and says, I've moved out, my ex-husband doesn't want to tell my child, I have to tell my child because my ex is not wanting to tell my child.
Mm-hmm.
So what I coach my client through is, so we make sure that obviously we take the child's age in consideration, because that makes a really, really big
Big
difference.
difference.
Really big difference.
Yeah.
And we figure out time and place is a really, really big part. And also where the child is going to be afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you don't want to have that conversation where the child then goes to bed right away, is alone after that right away, or happens to go on a vacation or just goes away. Right? So those are some key points. So I come in and work with a client through all the different scenarios. And believe it or not, we kind of work on a script together.
That makes sense. Just helping the parent put their thoughts down and kind of organizing thoughts and how to relay this information while maintaining connection with their child.
100% connection, empathy,
Mm-hmm.
what question the child often has. And every single time I do that, and this is actually something that I take very serious. And it's one of the things as heartbreaking as it is, that is one of the things I like to do the most with my clients because it is such an important thing.
Right.
And I say, guaranteed the first things your child is going to ask, does that mean I get to have 2 houses, 2 bedrooms, 2 beds? Always the same question. First question, am I going to continue to see that? It's the basics. It's not about, it's not the negative. It's not like, am I never going to see you? It's oftentimes the focus on, but I get to see you both, right?
Yeah, so essentially what they are asking is, will I still be loved? Will I still be safe? Will I still be seen? Will I still be heard? That's essentially what the kiddo will be asking.
And so we focus heavily on, right, how to say that, and then we focus on the follow-up statements, right? So what the script we work on, and it comes from the parents, obviously, the way they would say it. This means you still have a mom and dad who love you fully. And all these things, and that's why important that there is some kind of plan in place, right? And there's a plan, a follow-up plan, etc., where you follow up with the kids.
Yeah.
What other questions do you have? Where, all those things.
Absolutely.
School, all those things.
So one more scenario. So obviously when 2 parents separate, there's a great chance that they will meet somebody and move on. How do you introduce or bring up the concept of here's somebody else coming, and now we have this step parent scenario.
Right. So definitely complex, very important to figure out what age again. So I usually start with the parents or one parent, right? It kind of depends, if the person that I work, if that person was, is on their own, and really explore roles, about their boundaries. What is the relationship between the step parents? Age, very, very important. How they would be managing conflicts, who is going to be where at what time. Usually, how would a first time meeting look like?
Yeah.
Where would everybody meet and live for the first time? So there are a lot of those kind of questions.
Yeah.
And so that is something where I start with the parents first and really kind of work through strategies.
Yeah.
How they see it, and then how they want to have that conversation with the children.
Yeah.
Very important to bring the children in as soon as possible. So it's not all of a sudden everybody stands there and say, hi, I'm here now.
Yeah.
Right? Because depending on what household they move in, there are certain arrangements. This has always been my chair. This has always been my room. There are certain hierarchies. And so that's why it really depends on the ages of the children. So I facilitate sessions where we navigate those challenges, right?
Okay.
And explore how this new dynamic looks like. But I don't bring in the children, right? That is for the parents to do, right? Because they know their children the best.
Yeah. What practical tips would you give for parents to work together when raising their kiddos?
I think the most important thing is connection and safety, building really a loving and strong bond with boundaries, being clear and consistent with their expectations, and being a positive role model.
Yeah.
Practicing active listening, and listening is one thing, but active listening is something else.
100%.
Being very specific what that means and what the difference is. I'm a really big, I'm a stepmom of 3. Having phones in their hands is a continuous struggle. For our household, dinner time is extremely important, where no phone is in sight, and we talk about our day. At this point, only one comes to dinner, and we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
The ugly.
We talk about one thing that happened, one good thing that happened, and one that wasn't so great. And
I'm sorry, I just have to put this in here, but I'm actually in the process of creating a journal for kiddos where I have that in there. What is one good thing that happened today, and how did that make me feel? Just that emotional intelligence piece, teaching children how to actually feel their emotions, not trying to negate it or get rid of it or gaslight themselves into believing how they felt was invalid or whatever. So yeah, I think that's really important, like speaking about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and acknowledging that they all exist and two things can exist at the same time.
Yeah. And then we also, another thing, with when something great happens, did you feel that somewhere? Did that kind of give you prickles somewhere? Did that feel the negative? Did you feel that in your tummy
Yeah.
somewhere? Did you feel that in your body before it actually happened?
Mm-hmm.
Next time, are you going to act on that before you feel it in your body? Things like that.
Yeah.
And then also, empathy, really teaching children empathy is
Mm-hmm.
so important. And then together with independence is really about taking care of yourself and showing respect to elders.
I think those are really good practical tips for parents to be like
Yeah.
consistent in their two homes using these tips. I think that will make a big difference in a child's feeling loved, feeling valued, feeling safe in both homes.
Right. And it's always in those homes, right? And when I say be respectful to elders, it should also go and to animals, right?
Yeah.
That to me is also something that I feel pretty strongly about
Yeah.
personally. So
I have one more question for you before we wrap this up. If you were a kid and your
Mhm.
parents were separating, there's a divorce going through, like from a child's perspective, what would you say to your parents while this process is unfolding?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing would be don't say mean things about my other parent.
Mm.
Don't, I want to love you both. That is the biggest one. When and in the same way, don't criticize the other parent. It makes me angry at you.
Mm-hmm.
And don't make me pick between you. It's
Mm.
not fair. Handle your, well, let me go down the list because I did write down a couple of things. um, don't make me pick between one or the other. I want to spend time equally.
Mm.
Don't track my time like I'm on the clock. I'm not a tool. That's a really big one
Yeah.
because sometimes with divorced parents, kids do turn into tools. They get shoved around, and handle your financial conversations in private. I'm not, I don't want to hear about it. I'm not your messenger.
Yeah.
How often have I heard mom said, you're not paying enough. Mom said,
Yeah.
or dad said, don't keep me from seeing the other parent. If you do, I'll grow up resenting you.
Yeah.
I think that's a really big one. And I don't want to be your counselor. I'm not going to help you with your problems.
Yeah.
I want to be a child. Laugh and smile. Don't forget that I have a divided heart now. I live in two different houses, two rules, two traditions, two attitudes. Be patient with me. Sometimes I may forget things.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's also important to note that, just from my opinion, that when there's two parents and things are volatile and you can't get the other parent to cooperate, I think it's very important to, like we said, don't badmouth the other parent. You can't control how that parent reacts, how that parent responds, but you can control making your home the safest, most loving, most accepting and empathetic environment, because that's a trauma for the child when there's that disconnect, when there's that not getting along, and the child probably would come back from the other home dysregulated because things aren't feeling safe and they're not feeling because there's no cooperation. So I think the most important part for parents to note there is that when it's like that and there is no cooperative situation and no way to get through, that you do your very best to make your home environment loving, safe,
Mhm.
and accepting for the kiddo that comes home to that house.
Right. Exactly. That's really, really important. Uh, Something else that kind of popped in my head that I wanted to kind of put out there, and this comes up all the time, and I'm sure you've heard it as well. Co-parents are usually, and people going through divorce as well, maybe even more so. Co-parents are typically very influenced by people in their inner circle, families, new partners, friends, people at work. And while their suggestions and tips and tricks and, oh, read this book about, I'm sure he's a narcissist, or I'm sure she is, what are all the new terms? Narcissist is usually a pretty
Yeah.
good one. Or, no, I'm sure he's bipolar or
Yeah.
whatever, all those terms. Those are all well meant and want to be supportive. But ultimately, these suggestions just stir the pot because it is trying to change the other person. And it's not about the other person anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's about you trying to adjust to a new life and giving your child the best life possible
Yeah.
moving forward, right? And unless your child is in an unsafe environment every time they are with their other parent, they are okay.
Yeah.
Right? Unless there are signs of abuse or anything like that. So it is very challenging to listen to all the chatter around. So that's why really working with someone who understands the intricacies about all the things that go on makes a lot of sense because, we work from a neutral point, and it's not about labeling the other person, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not about judging the other person, right? I'm not going to change the partner. I'm not going to spend my time wanting to talk about the other partner
Mm-hmm.
or the co-parenting person coach, right? And that's a really important thing to understand. So
Yeah.
that was just something I wanted to add, right? It's
Absolutely.
about you as a parent getting better for your child and not us sitting around talking what a narcissistic
Yeah. Just doing
person.
your best and letting the other parent do what they are doing. You can't control it. You can try to collaborate, but when it's not always possible, that's the reality. You just focus on how you respond and how you can make it better for yourself and for your child.
Exactly. And the whole idea is that we work. That is the first, that is really the first intention, or the really the intention is that you can work together. That is
Mm-hmm.
always the number one plan for
Absolutely. Vivian,
the
thank you so
children's
much
sake.
for doing this. Before we end our conversation, how can listeners reach you and reach out to you?
Absolutely. You can find me on my website. So it's Viviane, Viviane, Veraguth, Veraguth.com, or my email, first name, last name @outlook.com. And that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Perfect. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I think this was such an informative conversation. And if you have learned something and you want to dig a little bit deeper, whether it is co-parent coaching with Viviane, where you can reach her at her website, I will put it in the show notes, or even going forward with me in parent coaching, you can, I will put a link in the bottom there to set up a free 30-minute connect call and see how we can help you move forward in this journey called parenting. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you listening. And thank you, Viviane. Your insights have been so valuable.
Thank you for tuning into the parenting. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have any questions, feedback, or content suggestions, please email us at taryn@theparenting.com. Please remember to subscribe, like, share, and give my aunt a 5-star rating. Come back again next week.